The sound of announcements echoing through the hospital corridor seemed to synchronize with Eleanor White's heartbeat. The small piece of paper tucked into her white coat pocket felt warm against her fingertips. It was the result of the pregnancy test she had taken that morning in her bathroom at home. Those 2 pink lines were evidence that would forever change her life. "Nurse White, please report to the 3rd floor nurses' station." Eleanor snapped back to reality and hurried toward the elevator. Her reputation at Maine Community Hospital was that of a consistently calm and reliable nurse. But today was different. Her mind was swirling. After 2 years of fertility treatments, countless days of disappointment and tears, a small ray of hope had finally appeared. A secret she hadn't shared with anyone yet. After finishing her shift, Eleanor stood at the hospital's main entrance waiting for her husband Gregory to pick her up. The autumn twilight gently enveloped Boston, and the crimson-leaved trees swayed in the breeze. When Gregory's sedan came into view, her heart began to pound fiercely again. "Hey, Ellie," Gregory said as he got out of the car and kissed his wife affectionately. "How was your day?" Eleanor smiled and said, "Honey, I have something to tell you when we get home." Noticing something in her voice, Gregory studied her face carefully before nodding gently. In their living room, Eleanor finally took out the small piece of paper. She would never forget the expression that appeared on Gregory's face. A complex mixture of surprise, joy, and deep love. As an IT specialist, he was always calm and logical, but at this moment, tears welled up in his eyes. "Really? Ellie, is this real?" Eleanor nodded silently, and they embraced for a long time. For a couple who had endured 2 years of trials together, there was no need to put into words how precious this moment was. The next day, Eleanor saw Dr. Caroline Brown, her obstetrician. A blood test confirmed the pregnancy, and an initial ultrasound was scheduled. Everything was progressing smoothly. Like many couples who struggle with infertility, they savored their joy cautiously. They decided not to tell close friends or colleagues until they safely passed the first 12 weeks. However, deep down, Eleanor was troubled by a weighty issue: how to share this joy with her mother Judith and sister Vanessa. Judith was a respected figure in the local social circle. She was a strong woman who had lost her husband early and raised 2 daughters alone. But her strength often transformed into strictness and perfectionism. When Eleanor chose to become a nurse, she had interrogated her with, "Why not become a doctor?" and criticized her late marriage, saying, "You should have prioritized family over career." In her eyes, her eldest daughter Eleanor was always a not enough. Meanwhile, Vanessa had grown up basking in her mother's adoration. With a glamorous career as a model, if Eleanor was the plain nurse, Vanessa was the shining star. She constantly looked down on Eleanor and even made Eleanor's fertility issues an object of mockery. She had once made the cruel joke, "Your uterus is just like your life, empty and boring." On the day of the 12-week ultrasound, Eleanor and Gregory anxiously watched the screen. There, the heartbeat of their little one was clearly displayed. "Congratulations, everything looks good," Dr. Caroline smiled. "It's safe to share the news with others now." On their way home, they were quiet in the car. Eventually, Gregory spoke softly, "Let's tell my parents this weekend. They'll be thrilled." Looking out the window, Eleanor replied, "Yes, Linda and David are wonderful in-laws. But..." She broke off. "Is it about your mother and Vanessa?" Gregory's voice was tinged with concern. Eleanor took a deep breath. "Do you think family relationships can be changed? Maybe with the birth of this child, we could build a new relationship." Gregory took his wife's hand. "It's worth trying. But however they react, we have my family. And most importantly, we have a new family being born." That weekend, sharing the news with Gregory's parents was met with the joy they had imagined. His brother Michael was especially excited, exclaiming, "I'm going to be an uncle? That's awesome." Eleanor's eyes welled up at the pure reaction from Michael, who had ADHD. The following week, Eleanor reluctantly called her mother. After a cold, business-like conversation, she summoned her courage and announced, "Mom, I'm pregnant." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Well, congratulations," Judith's voice lacked warmth. "Is it a healthy baby?" Eleanor's chest ached. Yes, everything is going well so far. I see. I'll let Vanessa know. That was it. Though the word congratulations was spoken, there was no affection behind it. At the 16-week checkup, Dr. Caroline performed a more detailed ultrasound. The baby's development is progressing well, but she began, choosing her words carefully. There are some points that require additional testing. Particularly, this area's development seems slightly delayed compared to standard. With her knowledge as a nurse, Eleanor understood what the doctor was implying. Are you suggesting the possibility of Down syndrome? The doctor answered frankly, we can't rule out that possibility. A definitive diagnosis would require amniocentesis, but from what we can see on the ultrasound, there are several indicators. After returning home, Eleanor and Gregory talked for a long time. No matter what, we'll love this child, Gregory firmly held his wife's hand. My brother Michael leads a wonderful life even with ADHD. It's the same with Down syndrome. Eleanor felt saved by her husband's strength. However, as she was planning a baby shower, a new anxiety sprouted in her heart. How should she tell her mother and sister about this possibility? The thought of their reaction made her stomach tighten. Nevertheless, Eleanor was determined. As a step toward repairing family relationships, she decided to invite her mother and sister to the baby shower. Now 20 weeks pregnant, her belly was growing day by day. The results of the amniocentesis were expected the week after the baby shower. You don't need to invite your mother and sister, Gregory said with concern. Eleanor had made up her mind. This baby has taught me something. Life is too short. Family is family, in whatever form. I want to give them a chance. So Eleanor called her mother and sister to invite them to the baby shower. And summoning her courage, she also shared that the baby might have Down syndrome. Well, that's unfortunate, her mother's words froze Eleanor's heart. Making matters worse, she could hear Vanessa's cold laughter in the background. Still, Eleanor didn't abandon her faint hope. She wanted to believe that if her mother and sister could feel the baby's presence up close, something might change. On the day of the baby shower, Eleanor and Gregory's home was decorated with bright balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome Baby." The living room table was covered with a pastel tablecloth and adorned with pink and blue cupcakes. They had used both colors since they hadn't revealed the gender yet. Linda, the decorations are perfect, Eleanor thanked Gregory's mother. Linda Morris smiled warmly. Of course they are. This is our first grandchild. Linda and her husband David had arrived the day before to help with preparations. Gregory's brother Michael had also arrived early in the morning and was excitedly inflating balloons like a child. Ellie, look. I made this teddy bear myself, Michael proudly showed her a handmade teddy bear. Even its clumsy stitches made it more endearing. If the baby cries, press this button and it plays a lullaby. Eleanor's heart was filled with emotion. Michael, this is truly a wonderful gift. Michael smiled happily. It's the first one I've made. I followed a YouTube tutorial. I lost focus halfway through, but I kept going because it was for the baby. Eleanor's eyes welled up at this pure affection. Since being diagnosed with ADHD, Michael had faced various challenges. Yet, his kindness and creativity were never diminished. At 2 p.m., friends and colleagues began to arrive. Eleanor's hospital colleagues brought practical childcare items, while Gregory's co-workers gifted adorable baby clothes. The room was filled with laughter and words of blessing. However, Eleanor's gaze repeatedly turned toward the entrance. Her mother and sister had not yet arrived. Don't worry, Gregory placed his hand on his wife's shoulder. They might not come, but this party is still wonderful. Eleanor tried to smile, but at that moment, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, there stood Judith and Vanessa. Her mother wore her usual stern expression and an expensive tweed suit, while her sister was in a colorful summer dress, obviously overdressed for the occasion. Hello, Mom, Vanessa, Eleanor greeted them with a smile despite her nervousness. I'm glad you came. Judith merely nodded slightly and entered the house. There are a lot of people here, she remarked coldly. Vanessa looked at Eleanor's belly and said, You've gotten quite big. There was a hint of sarcasm in her tone. Linda welcomed the two. Judith, it's nice to meet you. I hope this will be a lovely party. Judith put on a ceremonial smile and replied, yes, indeed. The atmosphere froze for a moment, but the bright conversation of other guests eased it. The party progressed as planned, and guests enjoyed a baby product knowledge quiz. Eleanor's colleague Kate acted as the host, and winners received cute prizes. Judith and Vanessa didn't participate, sitting in a corner of the room, whispering something. It's gift time. Kate announced. Eleanor and Gregory sat on the sofa, opening presents one after another. They expressed gratitude for each item, and everyone exclaimed, how cute, at Michael's handmade teddy bear. Finally, a small package was handed over from Judith and Vanessa. Mom, Vanessa, thank you. Eleanor opened the package with anticipation. What emerged was a pamphlet titled Early Intervention Program for Children with Special Needs. A sticky note read, pre-booked. The room fell silent. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. She could feel Gregory tense beside her. This is. Eleanor stumbled over her words. Judith spoke up. You said the baby might have issues. I thought you should be prepared. Eleanor took a deep breath to calm herself. Thank you, Mom. But we don't have a definitive diagnosis yet. She struggled to maintain her smile. Besides, whatever happens, this child is our beloved baby. Love alone won't get you through, Judith said coldly. Face reality, Eleanor. Raising a disabled child is beyond your capabilities. The air in the room froze. Gregory stood up and said in a quiet but firm tone, Judith, today is a day of celebration. Let's not have this conversation. Vanessa laughed. Celebration? What are we celebrating? The birth of a problematic child. Linda quickly intervened. Every child deserves to be celebrated. My son Michael has ADHD, but he has brought immeasurable joy to our family. Judith gave Michael a disdainful look. That's your values. Our family line doesn't have such issues. Eleanor stood up, holding back tears. This child, whatever condition they're born with, will be loved by us. If that doesn't align with your values, then that's unfortunate. Judith's face hardened. Your naive thinking has always been the problem. You should also consider options for putting this child up for adoption. Please leave, Gregory's voice resonated low. Leave our house right now. The room was tense. Other guests anxiously watched. Eleanor took out the latest ultrasound picture with trembling hands and declared, this is my child. I love them and will protect them. Eleanor, get a grip, Judith said coldly. Your choices are dishonoring the family name. Linda stood up and positioned herself next to Eleanor. Every child is a blessing to be celebrated. With or without disabilities, each life is precious. I won't change my mind on that. Judith and Vanessa sneered. Eleanor summoned her last bit of courage and said, next week, we'll get the final test results. But whatever they may be, my resolve won't change. Vanessa frowned. That stubbornness is your biggest flaw, Eleanor. Always thinking you're right. The room's atmosphere worsened. Michael, waving his hands anxiously, said, everyone, don't fight. Isn't today the baby's day? At those innocent words, the room fell silent for a moment. Eleanor squeezed Gregory's hand. Michael is right. Today is a day of celebration. If you can't participate, you're welcome to leave. Judith said in a trembling voice of anger, so you've made your choice about family. I understand perfectly. She took Vanessa's arm and said, let's go. The two left the room without even glancing at the other guests. The front door slammed shut loudly. The remaining guests were confused and silent. Eleanor, fighting back tears, said, everyone, I'm sorry. Let's continue the party. Gregory's parents and friends comforted Eleanor with warm words, and gradually the party atmosphere softened. But a deep wound remained in Eleanor's heart. As the clock struck 5 p.m., most guests began preparing to leave. Eleanor was in the kitchen cleaning up with Linda. Eleanor, you're a strong woman, Linda said quietly. Remember, we're always on your side. Eleanor's heart was filled with gratitude. Thank you, Linda. At that moment, the kitchen door opened, and there stood Judith and Vanessa. We need to talk, Judith's voice echoed coldly. Linda sensed the situation and said, I'll step out for a bit. Please do, Judith said coldly. This is a family matter. Linda hesitated for a moment, but after exchanging a glance with Eleanor, she nodded slightly. I'll be right nearby, she said as she left the room. Only the three of them remained in the kitchen. The twilight light coming through the kitchen window cast long shadows on their faces. Eleanor began to speak calmly. What happened today was truly regrettable. But I still think there's room for reconciliation. When this child is born, I'd like you to meet them. Judith's expression changed. Her cold demeanor transformed into one filled with anger. Meet? Don't be ridiculous. Eleanor's chest ached. Why are you so cold? This child is your grandchild. A child with disabilities is not my grandchild, Judith's voice was ice cold. Vanessa laughed. Eleanor, face reality. You've always been dreamy, turning a blind eye to reality. It's the same this time. Do you understand how difficult it is to raise a child with disabilities? It's not about difficulty, Eleanor said with a trembling voice. This is my beloved child. No matter what condition they're born in. Love. Judith snorted. You can't live on love alone. You're a nurse, so you should understand how raising a child with disabilities restricts your life. Your career, your marriage, everything will be sacrificed. Eleanor picked up the ultrasound photo from the table. This is my child. I love them. In that moment, Judith suddenly snatched the ultrasound photo. Foolish child. Her voice shook with anger. We don't want disabled children in this family line. And then she tore the ultrasound photo into pieces. The fragments flew through the air and scattered on the floor. Eleanor stood dumbfounded. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Mom. Her voice was hoarse. Vanessa laughed coldly. Just get rid of it, a cruel light resided in her eyes. Then I can remain mother's favorite. It took Eleanor time to comprehend the meaning of those words. Vanessa, are you jealous? Jealous. Vanessa's face contorted. Of someone like you? Don't be ridiculous. I just don't want you to cause mother worry. Judith leaned on the table. Eleanor, it's not too late. Abortion or adoption after birth. Choose one. I will never do either of those things. Eleanor cried out through tears. Why are you both so cold? This is life, my child. At that moment, a flame of anger ignited in Vanessa's face. Always like this. You always think you're right. Then, something no one could have predicted happened. Vanessa suddenly lunged at Eleanor and kicked her in the stomach. It's just trash, get rid of it. Eleanor's world darkened in an instant. Excruciating pain coursed through her body, and she collapsed to the floor. She could hear Judith's surprised cry and Vanessa's rough breathing from a distance. Eleanor? She thought she heard Gregory's voice. But her consciousness was rapidly fading. When Eleanor opened her eyes, she was lying on the living room sofa. Her head ached dully, and when she placed her hand on her stomach, there was pain. Ellie. Gregory's worried face came into view. Are you all right? The baby, she asked weakly. It's okay, the heartbeat is confirmed, Gregory squeezed her hand. The ambulance will be here soon. Eleanor slowly looked around. In the room were David and Michael with expressions frozen in horror, and Linda trembling with anger. Judith and Vanessa stood in front of the TV, their faces pale. What? Eleanor searched for words. You lost consciousness, Linda said. Her voice shook with anger. Those two. Shut up. Judith shouted. It was an accident. Eleanor just fell. Eleanor was confused. Her memories were fragmented, and she wasn't sure if the shocking event of being kicked in the stomach had really happened. However, at that moment, she noticed something. Linda was holding a smartphone in her hand. And on that smartphone screen was footage of the kitchen. Is that? Eleanor asked in a trembling voice. Gregory's expression hardened. Remember the security system Linda gave us as a present last year, he said quietly. There was a surveillance camera in the kitchen too. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Everything that had happened in the kitchen had been recorded. She tried to sit up slowly but winced in pain. Don't move, Gregory placed his hand on her shoulder. The sound of sirens could be heard in the distance. The ambulance was approaching. Delete that footage. Judith suddenly shouted. She advanced toward Linda. This is a family matter. A family matter? A flame of anger burned in Linda's eyes. Assault on a pregnant woman is not a family matter. It's a crime. Vanessa was leaning against the wall with a pale face. Please, it was an accident. I was just too excited and... Eleanor was staring at Linda's smartphone. On the screen was Eleanor herself. Her holding the ultrasound photo, Judith tearing it up, and, the moment Vanessa kicked her in the stomach. Reality hit her. This wasn't a nightmare, it had actually happened. Her family, her mother and sister, had hurt her and her baby. Eleanor, listen, Judith suddenly said in a soft voice. You fell. That's what you should say. Because we're family. Eleanor squeezed Gregory's hand. Family, her voice was quiet but firm. Family protects and loves each other. You are different. The front door opened, and paramedics entered. They immediately began examining Eleanor's condition. She's a 5-month pregnant woman. There was a blow to the abdomen, and she temporarily lost consciousness, Gregory calmly explained to the paramedics. We've also called the police, Linda added. This is an assault case. The blood drained from Judith and Vanessa's faces. As Eleanor was placed on a stretcher, the two stood frozen in a corner of the room. Michael approached and held Eleanor's hand. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? His eyes were full of tears. It's okay, Michael, Eleanor smiled weakly. Our child is strong. As the ambulance siren blared, Eleanor lay on the stretcher, looking up at the sky. The first stars were beginning to twinkle in the evening sky. Her hand was placed on her stomach, still trembling. Ma'am, you'll be fine, the paramedic said gently. The baby's heartbeat is stable. Gregory sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. His face showed a mixture of anger and fear. Ellie, I promise to protect you both. You and the baby. Eleanor smiled faintly. Thank you, her voice was hoarse. The emergency room at City Hospital had the typical Friday evening hustle. However, the case of assault on a pregnant woman was prioritized, and Eleanor was immediately taken to the obstetrics emergency treatment room. Nurse White. Dr. Freeman, the attending physician, exclaimed in surprise as he entered the room. He was Eleanor's colleague. What on earth? Doctor, please, Eleanor said in a trembling voice. I'm worried about the baby. Dr. Freeman quickly assessed Eleanor's condition and began an ultrasound examination. A tense silence filled the room. Looking at the image displayed on the monitor, Dr. Freeman's expression relaxed. The baby is safe. There are no signs of placental abruption. Eleanor and Gregory both shed tears. They felt saved. However, I'll have you stay overnight for observation, Dr. Freeman continued. As a precaution, we'll do a more detailed examination tomorrow. Meanwhile, at Eleanor's house, Linda and David were explaining the situation to police officers. Michael was restlessly pacing back and forth, excited and confused. This is the footage, Linda handed her smartphone to the police officer. Everything is recorded. After watching the footage, the two police officers confronted Judith and Vanessa with stern expressions. Judith White, Vanessa White, we're arresting you on charges of assault and intimidation. Judith turned pale. Wait. This is a family matter. We have lawyers. You can contact your lawyers at the police station, the police officer said coldly and handcuffed them. Vanessa suddenly began to cry. I didn't mean to do this. I didn't mean to hurt Eleanor. Tell that to the court, the other police officer said. Linda and David silently watched as the two were escorted out. Michael was confused and kept asking, why did those people hurt Ellie? At the hospital, Eleanor had been moved to a private room and was on N4. She lay there with an exhausted expression, but her heart was at peace knowing the baby was safe. Gregory returned to the room. There was a new emotion on his face. Ellie, I heard from Dr. Freeman. Eleanor sensed something in his expression. What? Is something wrong with the baby? Gregory sat next to her bed and took her hand. No, it's good news, he smiled. There was a misinterpretation of the previous ultrasound. Dr. Freeman has rechecked the images. Eleanor gasped. Does that mean? There are no signs of Down syndrome, Ellie. Gregory's eyes glistened with tears. Of course, the final definitive diagnosis is still to come, but Dr. Freeman said, the shadow seen previously was due to the baby's position, not an abnormality. Eleanor was at a loss for words. Mixed emotions swirled within her. Joy, relief, and anger. Just the possibility of Down syndrome had driven her mother and sister to such actions. And now, learning that even that possibility didn't exist made their actions seem even more unreasonable. Our love wouldn't have changed regardless of the result, Eleanor said quietly. But my mother and Vanessa. She choked on her words. They've been taken to the police now, Gregory quietly informed her. Linda submitted the surveillance footage as evidence. Eleanor stared at the ceiling. The reality that her own mother and sister had been arrested was too shocking. However, there was a strange peace in her heart. For years, she had craved her mother's love and wished for reconciliation with her sister. But now, she had a sense that she no longer needed them. That night, Gregory stayed at the hospital and never left Eleanor's side. Linda and David also visited the hospital with Michael, showing Eleanor love and support. The next morning, when Eleanor woke up, bright sunlight was streaming through the window. Gregory was smiling at her bedside. Good morning, he said gently. How are you feeling? Good, Eleanor smiled. I feel, somehow free. Detailed tests that day confirmed that there were no issues with the baby. Dr. Freeman told Eleanor, despite the stress of this incident, the baby is surprisingly healthy. While preparing for discharge, the voice of a local news anchor came from the television in the hospital room. Last night, a shocking case of domestic violence occurred. A woman 5 months pregnant was assaulted by her mother and sister and transported to the hospital. The incident was recorded by surveillance cameras and serves as evidence. Eleanor and Gregory watched the screen. There, footage of their family with faces blurred was playing. A caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Pregnant woman assaulted, shocking footage of family abuse." The background of the incident reportedly involves family conflict over the health condition of the unborn baby, the anchor continued. The two suspects are currently being questioned by police. Gregory turned off the television. That's enough. Eleanor took a deep breath. To think our family would become news. It's going to be okay, Gregory held her hand. We'll get through this. Upon leaving the hospital, an unexpected scene unfolded. People with placards had gathered at the hospital entrance. Members of the local disability rights group had assembled to show support for Eleanor. Mrs. White, we respect your courage, a woman stepped forward and said. We are on your side and your child's side. Eleanor was too moved to speak. Strangers had gathered to support her. On the way home, Gregory worried, the house might be surrounded by media, but fortunately, their address had not yet been reported. Instead, bouquets of flowers and messages of support had been placed at their doorstep. They were from her hospital colleagues. Entering the house, Linda, David, and Michael were waiting. They had already finished cleaning the house and prepared a warm meal. Michael rushed to Eleanor and gave her a gentle hug. Is the baby okay? He asked with concern. Yes, it's fine, Eleanor embraced his shoulders. Thank you, Michael. Linda stepped forward. Eleanor, you can stay here as long as you want. We're here for you. Eleanor was filled with gratitude for Gregory's family. For the first time in her life, she felt the warmth of a true family. You know, Ellie, Michael suddenly said, even people like me need to be raised with love. At his simple words, tears welled up in the eyes of everyone in the room. That afternoon, there was a call from the police. Judith and Vanessa had paid bail and were temporarily released. However, a restraining order had been issued, forbidding them from approaching Eleanor and her family. Eleanor consulted with a lawyer and decided to take legal action. It wasn't an easy decision. But she prioritized the safety of herself and her baby, and moreover, she couldn't overlook such family violence. This isn't just for myself, Eleanor told Gregory. It's also for others suffering in similar situations. Gregory fully supported her decision. Ellie, you're truly a strong woman. This child will have the best mother. Eleanor smiled and placed her hand on her stomach. She had confidence that she would overcome any difficulties. Everyone has the right to choose what family means to them. On a snowy February morning, standing at the witness stand in Berkeley County Court, Eleanor said those words in a trembling voice. Her belly, now 8 months pregnant, was large, and her figure touched the hearts of those gathered in the courtroom. 3 months had passed since the incident, and the trial of Judith and Vanessa had begun. On the witness stand, Eleanor tearfully testified about the psychological abuse she had suffered from her mother and sister since childhood, and how, still believing in family bonds, she had invited them to her baby shower. I don't hate them, Eleanor said quietly. But for this child's protection, justice is necessary. The judge nodded deeply at Eleanor's testimony. The surveillance camera footage served as irrefutable evidence. As she left the courthouse, supporters warmly greeted her. The hospital where Eleanor worked had established a special maternity leave system for her and promised to set up a support program for families with disabled children when she returned to work. Eleanor, your testimony was wonderful, Kate embraced her. The hospital fully supports you. Gregory's employer also showed understanding for family support, offering him a flexible work arrangement. The crisis had brought unexpected blessings. As a result of the trial, Judith and Vanessa received suspended sentences and were ordered to perform community service as volunteers at facilities supporting people with disabilities. Additionally, a restraining order was issued, prohibiting them from contacting Eleanor and her family. After the sentencing, Judith approached Eleanor in the courthouse hallway. There was an expression on her face that Eleanor had never seen before. Eleanor, Judith stumbled over her words. My obsession with a perfect family blinded me and made me lose sight of true love. I'm sorry. Eleanor took a deep breath. I'm not ready yet. I need time. Judith nodded silently. A look of regret appeared in her eyes. With the arrival of spring, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She and her husband named her Grace. She has brought grace to us, Eleanor said, cradling the newborn. She changed everything. Gregory's family warmly supported the couple as they navigated the challenges of first-time parenthood. Michael was particularly delighted, saying, I'm going to be the baby's special uncle, and read picture books to Grace almost daily. Around that time, Judith, through her mandatory volunteer work, began to encounter the struggles and strengths of people with disabilities and their families. She started to realize that her values had been wrong. She sent anonymous letters to Eleanor expressing her remorse, but there was no reply. As summer passed and autumn leaves began to color the streets, Eleanor had transitioned from a surgical nurse to a coordinator for the Disability Child Support Program. Her experience had become a source of support for many families. One day, Eleanor was checking the member list for a new support group. There was a familiar name, Judith White. She moved from being a volunteer to a formal staff member, Barbara, the facility director, explained. She's showing remarkable talent, especially in activities with autistic children. Eleanor remained silent for a long time. Then, she made a decision. I want to meet her. On a day when the first snow of winter was falling, Eleanor visited the support center with Grace in her arms. From down the hall, Judith slowly walked toward her. There was a softness in her face that hadn't been there a year ago. She stopped when she saw Eleanor, and for the first time, saw her granddaughter's face. Grace's large blue eyes seemed to be looking at Judith. "Hello, Mom," Eleanor said quietly. Tears welled up in Judith's eyes. "Eleanor?" "Grace." There was still a long road ahead before complete forgiveness could bloom between them. But in this moment, Eleanor understood what true family bonds meant. It wasn't just about blood relations, but about accepting each other, growing together, and supporting one another. Holding Grace, Eleanor smiled. Her new family, Gregory and his family, and the reborn relationship with her mother, was becoming her a true family. "Grace, this is your grandmother," Eleanor said softly. A new step in a family bound by love and forgiveness, though not perfect and wounded, was beginning here.